What's going on, my good people? Mike Hidalgo here. Thank you for joining me on another FCP Euro DIY. Today, we're working on a 2018 Volkswagen Atlas. Today on the Atlas behind me, we're going to be covering how to replace your rear brakes. In front of us, we have one of the kits available on fcpro.com. This one happens to be equipped with Brembo OE rotors and some Akebono ceramic pads. We also have some new set screws and some new caliper carrier bolts should you want to replace or refresh those during your DIY. Typically, these can last anywhere from 40 to 60,000 miles. However, this being a larger vehicle, it's going to need a little bit more stopping power, so it's not uncommon for these brakes to go a little bit more quicker than they would on your smaller car like a Mark 7 GTI as an example. And to learn a little bit more about how to determine when to replace your brakes, be sure to click the video description below. We have a video linked on a little bit more of a deeper dive on how to check your brake pads, your brake discs, and everything related to that. But before we get started on this DIY, let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to need for this job. For this DIY, we have a hammer in case our brake rotor is stuck, torque wrench is pretty standard, 17 mil socket. We have a T30 for our set screws. And to get the guide pins off for the calipers, you're going to need a 7mm hex. Now this is the route, or this is a point in the DIY where you can go many different ways with it. You can take something like this, which is a standard 7mm hex 3/8 drive bit, and pair that with a 7mm wrench. This is due to the space or lack of space that you have to get a ratchet set in there. The trailing arm, if you know the MQB chassis at all, you'll know that it always blocks the access to the lower hex bolt, and the brake line kind of gets in the way of the upper one, but you can work around it. So what I recommend is, again, either a hex bit with a 7mm wrench or CTA 5057. It's a little 7-piece stubby hex bit set. So it comes with something like this. Now, while this looks super tiny, this is really all you need to get those guide pin bolts out, as long as you pair them with either a 12mm wrench. This one happens to be a ratcheting wrench, will make life a little bit easier, or a 12mm socket. The great thing about using this is that now we have just enough room to get this combo in place with our torque wrench so that we can actually torque down our hardware properly. That is usually the one thing about these brake DIYs on these models that you can't really do unless you have something like that. So again, you can go about it different ways. That's just my 2 cents and what I recommend. We have a flathead screwdriver. We have our piston compressor tool. This is another CTA tool, CTA 1465. Wire brush. For chemicals, we have some BMW brake cleaner and some liquid moly brake paste, both available on fcpro.com. 1/2-inch impact to speed up the removal of the wheel. And for those of you looking to remove the caliper carrier bolts, you're going to need an M14 triple square socket. We're going to probably be able to skip that today, and I'll show you how. But in case you needed to remove them from something else, M14 is going to be your friend. And last but not least, we're going to be using our Autel MX808 for the electronic parking brake, but we also have the Rostec cable available on fcpro.com as well if you just have a Volkswagen and you want to dedicate your money towards that. Now we know what we're working with, let's go ahead and get started. We're in the Atlas. We're going to set our parking brake first so that we can put it in a service mode position, so that we can compress the pistons, change out the pads, all that good stuff. To do that, we're going to be using our Autel again. We're in the service menu. We're going to look for EPB, electronic parking brake. Now we're going to click on Volkswagen. Then once that loads, we're going to go into brakes. First we'll pick Atlas, brakes, replace brake pads. And then it's going to tell you what's going to happen. It's going to give you a warning, and you're going to press OK. Then you just hit OK once more. And now you can hear that the parking brake has been fully retracted, at which point we can turn the ignition off right now so we don't drain the battery. Once we turn the ignition back on, then we'll proceed with the OK button on the tablet and go from there. So for now, let's get to the back of the Atlas, get it up in the air, and get some wheels off. We're going to be working on the back passenger side of the Atlas today. However, the steps are going to be identical for both sides of the vehicle. Obviously, you're going to want to do them at the same time since you have the electronic parking brake retract. So just keep that in mind. We're going to pop our beauty covers off. I'm just using the tool that comes in the trunk of the Volkswagen. You can also use a small pick to pull these plastic covers off. Then we have 5 17mm lug bolts. If you don't have an impact to zap these off, make sure you break them free with your 17 with the vehicle on the ground first, then raise it up and remove them the rest of the way. All right, now we have the wheel off. We have a better view of what we're working with. First things first is we want to make sure that the set screw is going to come off, because if the set screw can't come off, then we can't take the disc off and there's no point in taking this apart. So T30 for that. We're going to grab our 1/4-inch ratchet and just try to break that free. If for some reason everything is spinning on you or it's super tight, take a flathead screwdriver and just feed it into the vanes of the rotor, and it'll bind up against the caliper carrier bracket and it'll keep everything from spinning on you. Since it broke free, we're going to leave it in for now, but at least we know it's going to come off. Next, we have an anti-rattle clip on the front of our brake caliper. We're just going to cover it with our hands while we pry off with the flathead screwdriver. Just do one side at a time. You're only covering it so it doesn't accidentally hit you in the face. And then hang on to that for later. Now with that off, we can work on the 2 7mm guide pins that hold the caliper to the caliper carrier bracket. You have 2 little dust caps in the back, pretty standard. Just pop those off first. We're going to grab our stubby 7mm hex and our 12mm wrench, and we're just going to break both of these free first. Now I'm going to use the flathead screwdriver just to push these through the rest of the way. And now we can swing the caliper over. Because it's so short and there's not too much play both in the brake line and the harness going to the electronic parking brake, we can just kind of rest it on top of everything. You can go ahead and pop this line up out from the grommet if you want a little bit more slack. We're just going to go ahead and work our caliper off. Just be mindful those pads might be stuck and come out with them. Now you'll notice with the old pads, the inboard pad has the anti-rattle spring on it. The outboard pad does not. So when you install everything back together, just make sure the pad with the spring on it is on the inside. We're going to hang on to this old one for just a moment. We can pop that old one off there. With the pads off, we're going to keep one of the old ones and we're going to use it to press our piston back in. We're just going to set it over the face of the piston like so. Grab our compressing tool or piston compressor tool, situate that inside the caliper, take up the slack, and then we're just going to compress until it stops on its own. It should go in very nice and easy. And just like any other brake job, you can break the bleeder valve if you just want to get rid of the fluid through here and not introduce it back in. You can open up the cap and double check your reservoir level, make sure that the fluid is good there. This one hasn't been touched, so there hasn't been any additional fluid added, meaning we're not going to displace any fluid that wasn't there before, causing a leak anywhere. Once that's compressed, we can pop that off, get rid of that pad. And again, I'm just resting this on the rubber boot, sitting it on top of the carrier. It's not going to hurt anything. You're going to be just fine. Now we can work on taking that T30 off the rest of the way. And one of the nice things about these cars is you don't have to struggle with those annoying M14 bolts. You can just wiggle this baby out of here. So that's going to save us a lot of time and effort. And now we can just wire wheel or wire brush our hub, get some of that excess rust off. Give it a little spritz of brake cleaner. All right, and now you are ready to install your new brake disc. We're going to take our paste and just lube up the back side here so that the new brake disc has a better chance at not sticking to the hub. I like to get some where the set screw goes. Again, the most annoying thing you can do is have to drill one of those out during your brake job. For those of you looking to remove the 2 M14s, just remember you always have to replace them. They are torque to yield bolts. Those get torqued to 90 Newton meters plus an additional 90 degrees. All right, we have our disc. We're gonna go ahead and feed this baby back in. Line up the bolt hole for the set screw. Again, I like to put a little bit of paste. This is so overkill, but it makes me feel better. It'll keep it from seizing to the face of the disc. Just making it all easier for the next person, for the next good people that may work on this car. T30 to get it started. I'm just gonna get it started by hand. And then I'm just gonna use a 1/4-inch ratchet to snug it up. No more than 10 Newton meters if you wanna torque it back at home. Beautiful. And then you already know, I'm going to encapsulate it. There we go. With that situated, we can slide our pads on. I'm going to put a little bit of paste on the ears on both sides. And just remember, the pad with the spring lives on the inboard side of things. With these situated, now we can sling our caliper back over. It's up to you if you want to apply a little bit of paste to the back side of the outside tabs here. This is something that sometimes people do. I like to do it. It just kind of keeps everything from making any noise and keeps everything nice and lubed up. As you slide the caliper on, make sure that that spring clip doesn't go out through the center of the caliper here by accident. And then we can take our guide pins. And now this is, if you've watched any of our other brake DIYs, where I say it's always going to be dealer's choice on whether or not you want to lubricate them. And any write-ups you see, it's never something that's required. For every brake job I've been doing for the last 15 years, I always put a little bit of paste on them. So, dealer's choice here if you want to play along or not. And we'll just slide these babies in and just push them up against the caliper carrier bracket. You can almost kind of feel them engage a hair or so, and that'll help line everything up for us. Now we're going to take our ratcheting wrench and our 7mm hex stubby, and we're just going to snug these up gently, and then we'll torque them down properly. Now we're going to switch over to the 12mm socket and our torque wrench. It's set to 35 Newton meters, and we have just enough room to sneak it in here and torque everything up. Just make sure that hex bit is in all the way before you apply any torque or anything. Here's the bottom. For the top, I recommend the small 3-inch extension, which you saw at the beginning of the video, just to help clear that soft line a little bit. It's really in a bad spot, but if you just give it a gentle push down, we can get it in just enough. Then we can put our 2 little dust boot covers back on. If you unclipped the harness before, don't forget to just clip it back in on the upper control arm here. Now we can install our anti-rattle clip. Always start on one side, get it fully engaged in first, then swing it over, get that other side started, and then just push in both sides with your 2 thumbs at the same time. Okay, all we have left is to throw on our wheel, so let's get to it. With the vehicle back on the ground, these 17mm lug bolts get torqued to 140 Newton meters in a crisscross pattern. All right, let's get our beauty caps back on. And now let's head back inside the car and finalize the electronic parking brake procedure. Back in the vehicle, we're gonna just press the ignition start-stop button just to get the ignition back on. And then with it back on, we can press OK on our tablet. And you can hear the parking brake setting itself back up. And so with that, now we can apply the parking brake. And that's going to be it, my good people. We can press OK, disconnect this tool. And that is going to conclude this DIY for today. Overall, a really straightforward and easy job on the Atlas. Again, super nice that we don't have to remove the rear caliper carrier bracket. So yeah, you need a scan tool to retract the parking brake, but it's a little bit easier to do over a brake job than most vehicles. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments on what we did today, leave those in the comment section below. And if you like this DIY and you want to see more like them, please consider subscribing. We make new ones all the time. As always, thank you so much for watching. Catch you on the next one.